He came to fix her stereo, just a favor for his mom's friend. But when Eleanor whispered, "You see me, don't you?" the air turned electric. What happened in that kitchen would haunt him forever. The party was in full swing by the time I arrived at the old brick house on Marwood Lane, a quiet street tucked away in the north end of Asheville. The place belonged to my mother's friend, Eleanor Hadley, a woman I'd only met a handful of times growing up. The house was one of those sprawling, slightly weathered Victorians with ivy crawling up the sides and a wraparound porch that creaked underfoot. Strings of fairy lights hung across the backyard, casting a warm glow over the crowd of people I barely recognized. My mother had insisted I come, some kind of annual summer gathering she and her old college friends threw to reminisce about their wilder days. I was 23, fresh out of college, and working a dead-end job at a local bookstore while I figured out what to do with my life. Parties like this weren't my scene, but I owed my mom a favor for helping me cover rent last month. I stepped through the front door, the air thick with the smell of grilled meat and jasmine from the garden outside. The living room was packed, women in their 40s and 50s laughing over wine glasses, men in polo shirts swapping stories about golf swings and stock markets. I scanned the room for my mom, spotting her near the kitchen, her auburn hair tied back as she gestured animatedly to a group of her friends. She waved me over, but I hung back, tugging at the collar of my button-down shirt. It was too warm for long sleeves, but I hadn't had time to change after my shift. "Elliot, you made it!" My mom's voice cut through the chatter as she pulled me into a quick hug. "Come on, say hi to everyone. You remember Eleanor, don't you?" I nodded, though I barely did. Eleanor Hadley was a tall woman, probably in her late 30s or early 40s, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair that fell in loose waves past her shoulders. She had this quiet intensity about her, like she was always observing more than she let on. I vaguely recalled her from a barbecue years ago, when I was maybe 15, her laughing with my mom over something I didn't understand. Tonight she was standing by the fireplace, a glass of red wine in her hand, her eyes catching the light as she talked to a couple I didn't know. She wore a sleeveless black dress that hugged her frame, elegant but not showy, and there was a certain grace in the way she moved, deliberate, like she knew exactly how much space she took up. "Elliot, good to see you," Eleanor said, her voice low and warm as she turned toward me. Her smile was polite but guarded, and her eyes lingered on me a moment longer than I expected. "It's been a while." "Yeah, hi," I said, shoving my hands in my pockets. "Nice place you've got." She tilted her head, as if weighing my words. "Thank you. It's a bit of a fixer-upper, but it's home." Her gaze flicked to my mom, then back to me. "Your mother says you're working at that bookstore on Clover Street?" I nodded, feeling the familiar pang of embarrassment. It wasn't exactly a career to brag about. "Yeah, just for now. Keeps me busy." She raised an eyebrow, but there was no judgment in her expression, just curiosity. "Good. Busy's good." She took a sip of her wine, and I noticed her fingers. Long, steady, with a simple silver ring on her left hand. No wedding band, though I remembered my mom mentioning Eleanor was married. Maybe she just didn't wear it. The conversation shifted as my mom dragged me toward the buffet table, piling a plate with food I didn't ask for. I spent the next hour drifting through the party, making small talk with people I'd never see again, nodding at stories about corporate mergers and vacation homes. The backyard was quieter, with clusters of guests sitting on lawn chairs or standing near a small fire pit. I grabbed a beer from a cooler and leaned against the porch railing, grateful for the breeze. That's when I saw Eleanor again. She was alone now, standing near the edge of the garden, her arms crossed as she stared out at the darkening sky. The fairy lights caught the curve of her neck, and for a moment I couldn't look away. There was something about her, maybe the way she stood so still, like she was carrying a weight no one else could see. I shook my head, feeling foolish. She was my mom's friend, probably twice my age, and I had no business noticing her like that. I was about to head back inside when she turned and caught my eye. "Elliot," she called softly, her voice cutting through the hum of the party. "Can you give me a hand with something?" I hesitated, then set my beer down on the railing and walked over. "Sure, what's up?" She gestured toward the house, her expression unreadable. "My husband isn't coming tonight. He's tied up with work. I could use some help with the sound system in the den. It's acting up again." I nodded, following her through the back door into the house. The den was down a narrow hallway, past a staircase lined with framed photos. Eleanor with a man I assumed was her husband, a few shots of a golden retriever, a beach somewhere with palm trees. The room itself was cozy, with a leather couch, a bookshelf stuffed with novels, and a small stereo system in the corner. The music from the living room was faint here, replaced by the hum of crickets outside the window. "It's this thing," she said, pointing to the stereo. "It keeps cutting out. I've tried everything, but I'm hopeless with electronics." I crouched down, checking the cables. Probably just a loose connection. "Let me take a look." As I fiddled with the wires, Eleanor leaned against the arm of the couch, watching me. The air felt heavier in here, like the walls were holding their breath. I could smell her perfume, something soft, like lavender and cedar, and it made my pulse quicken in a way I didn't expect. "You're good with this kind of thing?" she asked, her voice casual but laced with something else. Curiosity, maybe, or amusement. I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the stereo. "I'm okay. Used to help my dad with stuff like this before he moved out west. It's usually just a matter of finding the right wire." She didn't say anything for a moment, and I could feel her gaze on me, steady and unyielding. "You're a lot like your mother," she said finally. "Quiet, but thoughtful." I glanced up, caught off guard. Her eyes were locked on mine, and there was something in them I couldn't quite read, something that made my stomach twist. "Thanks, I guess," I said, forcing a smile as I turned back to the stereo. My fingers brushed against a loose plug, and I pushed it in, the speakers crackling to life with a low hum. "There we go," I said, standing up. "Should be fine now." She didn't move, just kept looking at me, her arms still crossed. "Thank you, Elliot, I appreciate it." Her voice was softer now, almost too soft, and it sent a shiver down my spine. She stepped closer, just enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence, and for a split second, I thought she might say something else. But she didn't. She just nodded, her lips parting slightly, then turned toward the door. "I should get back to the guests," she said, her tone brisk again. "You're welcome to stay as long as you like." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, thanks." She paused in the doorway, her hand resting on the frame. "You're a good kid, Elliot," she said, almost like an afterthought. But the way she said it, the way her eyes lingered on me, didn't feel like she was talking to a kid at all. I stood there for a moment after she left, the hum of the stereo filling the silence. My heart was racing, and I didn't know why. I told myself it was nothing, just a fleeting moment, a trick of the light, a misread glance. But as I walked back to the party, the noise and laughter swallowing me up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something I couldn't name. "This is only the beginning," You have no idea what she'll decide to do in a few hours." The party dragged on, the backyard now a mosaic of flickering lights and half-empty wine glasses. I wandered back to the porch, grabbing another beer from the cooler, the cold glass grounding me as I tried to shake off the moment in the den. Eleanor's voice, her gaze, the way she'd stood just a little too close, it clung to me like damp air. I told myself I was imagining things. She was my mom's friend, married, probably in her early 40s, with a life I knew nothing about. I was just some kid who fixed her stereo. But the way she'd looked at me didn't feel like nothing. I found a spot near the fire pit, the crackle of burning wood cutting through the chatter. My mom was still inside, laughing with a group of women over some story about their college days. I scanned the crowd, half expecting to see Eleanor again, but she'd vanished into the house. I sipped my beer, the bitterness sharp on my tongue, and tried to focus on the conversation around me. A guy in a linen shirt talking about his new boat, a woman complaining about her neighbor's dog. It was all noise, none of it sticking. "Elliot, there you are." My mom's voice broke through as she appeared beside me, her cheeks flushed from wine. "You're not hiding out here, are you?" "Nah, just getting some air," I said, forcing a smile. "It's a lot in there." She laughed, patting my arm. "You're too young to be this antisocial. Come on, mingle a little. Eleanor was asking about you." My stomach did a quick flip. "She was?" "Yeah, said you fixed her stereo like a pro." My mom grinned, oblivious to the way my grip tightened on the bottle. "She's sweet, isn't she? Always been the quiet one in our group, but she's got a heart of gold." I nodded, not trusting myself to say much. "Yeah, she seems nice." My mom didn't notice the hesitation in my voice. She was already turning back to the house, waving at someone across the yard. "Don't stay out here all night, okay?" "Have some fun." I mumbled something in agreement and watched her go, the fairy lights blurring as my eyes drifted to the garden again. The night was cooler now, the air carrying the faint scent of honeysuckle from the bushes lining the fence. I was about to head inside when I heard footsteps on the gravel path behind me. "Elliot!" Eleanor's voice was unmistakable, low and steady, like she was testing the sound of my name. I turned, and there she was, standing a few feet away, a shawl draped over her shoulders. The black dress still hugged her frame, and the light from the fire pit caught the edge of her jaw, casting soft shadows across her face. She looked older in this light, but not in a bad way. Her features carried a kind of quiet strength, like she'd seen things I could only guess at. "Hey," I said, my voice catching slightly. "Everything okay with the stereo?" She smiled, a small, almost private curve of her lips. "It's perfect. You're a lifesaver." She stepped closer, her arms crossed loosely, the shawl slipping slightly to reveal the curve of her collarbone. "I didn't mean to pull you away from the party earlier. I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable." "No, not at all," I said too quickly, then winced at how eager I sounded. "I mean, it was no trouble. Happy to help." She tilted her head, studying me. "You're sweet," she said, and there it was again, that intensity in her eyes, like she was seeing something I didn't even know was there. "Not many people your age would bother with a stranger's stereo." I shrugged, my hands back in my pockets. "It's not a big deal. I like fixing things." "Still," she said, her voice softening, "it means a lot." She paused, glancing back at the house, where the party was still in full swing. "It's been a long night. I'm not used to hosting this many people anymore." I nodded, unsure what to say. There was a weight to her words, something unspoken that made me want to ask questions I had no right to ask. Instead, I said, "Looks like everyone's having a good time, though. You're a good host." She laughed, a quiet, almost bitter sound. "I try. It's what people expect." Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a moment I thought I saw something raw there. Loneliness, maybe, or exhaustion. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that guarded smile. "Can I ask you something, Elliot?" "Sure," I said, my heart picking up speed. She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the shawl. "Do you ever feel like you're playing a part? Like you're supposed to be someone, but it doesn't quite fit?" The question caught me off guard, and I felt my face heat up. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm just figuring things out, you know. The bookstore job, living on my own. It's not exactly what I thought I'd be doing at 23. She nodded, like she understood more than I'd said. "It's strange, isn't it? You think you'll have it all sorted out by a certain age, but life doesn't work that way." She looked away, her gaze settling on the fire pit, the flames reflecting in her eyes. I thought I'd have it figured out by now, too. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words stuck in my throat. There was something about the way she stood there, so composed yet so fragile, that made me feel like I was intruding just by being near her. I shifted my weight, the gravel crunching under my shoes. "You seem like you've got it together," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "This house, the party, it's all pretty impressive." She gave me a look, half amused, half skeptical. "Appearances can be deceiving." She took a step closer, and I could smell her perfume again, that same lavender and cedar that made my chest tighten. "Can I ask you for another favor?" "Yeah, of course," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The patio lights," she said, pointing to a string of bulbs that had gone dark along the edge of the garden. "They keep flickering. I think it's the extension cord. Would you mind taking a look?" I nodded, grateful for something to do with my hands. "Sure, no problem." We walked together to the far side of the yard, where the grass gave way to a stone path lined with roses. The extension cord was tangled in a flower bed, and I knelt down to untangle it, my fingers brushing against the cool dirt. Eleanor stood nearby, holding the shawl tighter around her shoulders. The night was quiet here, the party's noise fading into the background, leaving just the rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a cricket. "Looks like it's just unplugged," I said, finding the end of the cord and pushing it back into the outlet. The lights flickered back on, casting a soft glow over the roses. I stood up, brushing the dirt off my hands, and turned to find Eleanor watching me again, her expression unreadable. "You're good at this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Fixing things." I laughed, rubbing the back of my neck. "It's just plugs and wires. Nothing fancy." She didn't laugh. Instead, she took a step closer, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind that come from years of smiling, or maybe crying. "Not everything's that easy to fix," she said, her voice so soft I almost missed it. I froze, my breath catching. There was something in the way she said it, something that made the air between us feel charged, like the moment before a storm. I wanted to say something, anything, but my mind was blank. All I could do was hold her gaze, her eyes dark and searching, like she was waiting for me to understand something she hadn't said. "Thank you, Elliot," she said finally, breaking the silence. She reached out, her hand brushing my arm for just a second, long enough to send a jolt through me. "I should let you get back to the party." "Yeah, I said, my voice rough. No problem. She turned to walk away, but then she stopped, looking back at me over her shoulder. You're not like the others here, she said, almost like she was talking to herself. You see things. Before I could respond, she was gone, her shawl trailing behind her as she disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, the lights glowing softly around me, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't know what she meant, but I knew one thing. Whatever was happening, it wasn't nothing anymore. What he says next will change everything, for her and for him. The party was winding down, the backyard emptying as guests drifted toward their cars parked along Marwood Lane. The fairy lights still glowed, but their warmth felt dimmer now, like the night was settling into itself. I stood by the fire pit, the embers glowing faintly, my beer long forgotten on the porch railing. Eleanor's words echoed in my head. You see things? And I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to. I was 23, barely holding my life together, and she was... what? A woman who carried herself like she'd already lived a lifetime I couldn't imagine. Her touch on my arm, brief as it was, lingered like a burn. I glanced at the house, its windows spilling light onto the lawn. My mom had texted me a few minutes ago, saying she was heading out with a few friends to grab a late-night coffee at the diner on Baxter Road. Don't wait up, she'd written, which meant I was free to leave. But I didn't. I told myself I was just making sure everything was okay, that Eleanor didn't need help cleaning up or fixing anything else. It was a flimsy excuse, and I knew it. I was about to grab my jacket from the porch when I heard the back door creak open. Eleanor stepped out, her shawl gone, her arms bare in the cool night air. She carried a tray of empty wine glasses, balancing it with the ease of someone used to handling chaos. Her hair was slightly mussed now, a few strands falling loose, and the sight of her, tired, human, unguarded, made my chest tighten. Elliot, she said, spotting me. Her voice was softer than before, like the party's end had stripped away some of her earlier composure. You're still here. Yeah, I said, shoving my hands in my pockets. Figured I'd stick around in case you needed anything else. You know, lights, stereos, that kind of thing. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're too kind, she said, setting the tray on a table near the fire pit. Most people would have bolted by now. I shrugged, trying to play it off. Not much waiting for me at home, just a couch and some half-read books. She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes narrowing slightly like she was trying to figure me out. You don't give yourself enough credit, she said. You're different. I laughed, nervous. Different how? I'm just a guy who knows how to plug in a cord. She shook her head, stepping closer. The fire pit's glow caught the edge of her dress, casting shadows that danced across her skin. You listen, she said. You notice things. Most people don't. I didn't know what to say to that. The air between us felt heavy again, like it had in the den, like every word was a step toward something we weren't supposed to touch. I glanced at the ground, the gravel crunching under my shoes as I shifted my weight. You're not so bad yourself, I said, my voice quieter than I meant. I mean, you seem like you've got a lot going on. Her laugh was soft, almost sad. That's one way to put it. She crossed her arms, looking out at the darkened garden. You want to know the truth? I'm exhausted. This house, this party, this life, it's all a performance sometimes. I swallowed, my throat dry. Then why do it? She turned to me, her eyes catching mine, and for a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, "Because it's easier than being alone." The words hit me harder than I expected. I thought about my own life, my tiny apartment on Clover Street, the endless shifts at the bookstore, the nights spent scrolling through job listings I wasn't qualified for. I knew what it felt like to keep moving just to avoid the quiet. But hearing it from her, a woman who seemed so put together, so untouchable, made it real in a way I hadn't expected. "I get that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The alone part." She tilted her head, studying me. "You're too young to feel like that," she said, but there was no judgment in her tone, just a kind of quiet recognition. "What's got you so weighed down, Elliot?" I hesitated, the question catching me off guard. I wasn't used to people asking, not really. My mom would check in, sure, but it was always surface level. How's work? How's the apartment? Are you eating enough? This was different. Eleanor was looking at me like she actually wanted to know, like she could see the cracks I tried to hide. "Just life, I guess," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "Trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do, where I fit, you know?" She nodded, her eyes softening. "I know, more than you'd think." We stood there for a moment, the silence stretching between us, filled only by the crackle of the fire pit and the distant hum of a car pulling away. I wanted to say something, to keep her talking, to keep her there. But before I could, she spoke again. "Come inside," she said, her voice low but firm. "Help me with these glasses, I can't carry them all myself." I followed her back into the house, the air cooler inside, smelling faintly of wine and the flowers from the garden. The living room was nearly empty now, just a few stray cups and plates scattered on tables. She led me to the kitchen, a bright space with white cabinets and a long oak table cluttered with empty bottles and crumpled napkins. She set the tray of glasses by the sink and started rinsing them, her movements slow and deliberate. "You don't have to help," she said, glancing at me over her shoulder. "I just didn't want to be in here alone." Something in her voice made my stomach twist. I stepped up beside her, grabbing a dish towel from the counter. "I don't mind," I said. "Beats standing outside by myself?" She smiled, handing me a wet glass to dry. Our fingers brushed, and I felt that same jolt from earlier, sharper this time. I focused on the glass, rubbing the towel over it until it squeaked, trying to ignore the way my pulse was racing. We worked in silence for a while, the clink of glass and the soft rush of water the only sounds. But the quiet wasn't empty. It was heavy, charged, like the air before a lightning strike. "You're good at this," she said after a while, her voice teasing but soft. "Domestic life suits you." I laughed, shaking my head. "Yeah, right, I can barely keep my own place clean." She turned off the faucet, drying her hands on a towel, and leaned against the counter, facing me. "You'd be surprised," she said. "It's the small things that matter. Showing up, helping out, being there." Her words hung in the air, and I felt my face heat up. I set the glass down, my hands clumsy, and met her gaze. Her eyes were dark, searching, and there was something in them that made my breath catch. A question, a challenge, maybe both. She was close now, closer than she needed to be, her hip brushing the edge of the counter, her body angled toward mine. "Eleanor," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. I should probably go." She didn't move, just kept looking at me, her lips parting slightly. "Do you want to go?" she asked, and the question was so simple, so direct, it stopped me cold. I didn't know what to say. The truth was, I didn't want to leave, not the kitchen, not the house, not her, but I knew I should. She was my mom's friend, older, married, carrying a weight I could only guess at. And I was just me, a kid with a dead-end job and no plan, standing in her kitchen, feeling things I had no right to feel. "I don't know," I said finally, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I don't know what I'm doing here." Her expression softened, and for a moment I thought she might step back, break the tension, let the moment pass. But she didn't. She reached out, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her fingers cool against my skin. "You're here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's enough." I froze, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. Her hand stayed there, steady, grounding, and I felt the world narrow to the space between us. I wanted to say something, to do something, but all I could do was look at her. Her eyes, her lips, the faint lines that told a story I'd never know. Then she stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth of her breath, the scent of her perfume wrapping around me. "Elliot," she said, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. We shouldn't." But she didn't pull away, and neither did I. My hand moved before I could think, brushing against hers, our fingers tangling for a fleeting second. It was nothing. A touch, a moment, but it was everything. The air between us crackled, and I felt the weight of it, the impossibility of it, the truth of it. She closed her eyes, her breath hitching, and when she opened them again, there was something raw there, something that mirrored the ache in my chest. "This is a mistake," she whispered, but she didn't move. I nodded, my throat tight. "I know." We stood there, caught in the quiet, the world outside the kitchen fading away. I wanted to kiss her, to close the distance, to let whatever this was consume us. But I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew, deep down I knew, it wasn't just about tonight. It was about her, about me, about the lives we were both trying to navigate. She stepped back first, her hand falling away, her eyes dropping to the floor. "You should go," she said, her voice steady now, but soft, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I nodded, my chest aching. "Yeah." I grabbed my jacket from the porch, the cool night air hitting me like a slap as I stepped outside. The street was quiet, the party long over, the fairy lights still glowing faintly in the yard. I walked to my car, my steps heavy, and when I reached the driver's door, I turned back, half expecting to see her in the doorway. But the house was still, the windows dark. I drove home, the radio off, the silence loud with everything we didn't say. I didn't know what would happen next, if I'd see her again, if she'd think of me, if this was the end or the beginning. But as I pulled into my apartment complex on Clover Street, one thing was clear. Something had changed, not just between us, but in me. And I wasn't sure I could go back.